Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a Books Beside My Bed video where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. Today I have a super short wrap up because if you've seen my 2025 channel plans, you'll know that I'm moving into a slightly different way of talking about the books that I read. So I'm reading a lot, but I'm reading a lot for various projects and for upcoming videos. So the things that fit in between that and the things that don't make me immediately cringe because I'm going to be talking about the same books repeatedly in the next 2 weeks means that I have a limited number of books to draw on for this weekly wrap up, but that's okay. And honestly, I've had a pretty good reading week considering that the week itself has been rather dramatic because it was the third last week of the year for work, which is always a tenuous time. Like the next couple of weeks are always just a little bit interesting as a teacher because from a staff perspective, we're all waiting to find out what year level we're teaching next year. We're waiting to find out who our class is next year. We're waiting to meet our class. We're wrapping up the end of the year and everyone's a little bit tired, and because it's Australia and we're having our hottest start to December that we've had in a very long time, it's an interesting time of the year. For those who are interested, I'm continuing to teach year 2 or second grade next year, so I'm not moving, which means this month and early into next year I'll be on the hunt for more books that would make great easy chapter book read alouds for my class. We had some great success last year, but of course every year the class dynamic is a little bit different, so you have to find books that match sort of their interest level. So I'm going to be on the hunt for those. But jumping into the reviews of the books this week, the first book that I listened to was A Very Short History of the Israel-Palestine Conflict by Ilan Pappe. I have a bunch of books on Israel and Palestine that I am hoping to read. This one came from a list that I saw online because there was a group of Australian authors and other individuals who got involved in purchasing a list of 5 books for every member of parliament in Australia. And they're all based around the history of what's happened in Palestine. And one, I think that is an amazing idea. I don't know how many of them are going to go off and read them, but they've all been handed a stack of books to do some summer reading, and making your parliamentarians read a bunch of books about things that they are making decisions and laws on should be something that they're doing. So I fully support this project. I am trying to make my way through some of those books, and this was one of them. And so this is, as it says, a very short history. And if you're in Victoria and you have access to Libby through your local library system, this one was available on Libby almost straight away. And as the title suggests, it's super short. It runs through the history of how everything has come about. As I've been reading more and understanding more about what's going on and the conflict, the genocide, all of that, I am aware of a lot of the things that Ilan talked about in his book, but also it puts everything into context and creates a really clear timeline for how everything has evolved. And it was, fascinating and horrifying, but a really easy to digest, manageable way of unpacking the timeline for all of these events. And if you are someone who just wants to know a little bit more about that and to start your journey, I think this is a good place to start. So I'm still continuing to read nonfiction in December. Like that's a good thing for me. I do have more books from that list that I am waiting for audiobooks and things like that to come in. I'm finding, for me, I think I've talked about this in many videos, that I find audiobooks the best way for me to consume nonfiction, because if I have it as an audio, I can't put it off, because I listen to audio now when I do all of my chores and all the things I need to do around the house. So there is a reason for me to be reading something, and so nonfiction then becomes a good default. Then I read Twist of Fate by Carly Lane, which is a new release Australian rural romance. It is a closed door romance, just be aware of that. And I had a review copy from NetGalley. I have previously read a lot of Carly Lane's books as they've been released. I used to get them as physical copies from the publisher, from Alan and Unwin. And I do enjoy coming back to her books because I know exactly what I'm going to get from them. And they probably lean closer to the contemporary fiction side of romance, but there is always a romance plot in there. So if you are someone who likes a closed door romance, this is a good mix. This is the story of Belle, who is a woman who lives in a small country town, and she's lived there her whole life. She had plans to leave, but in the end she stayed. She worked at a local convenience / petrol station store and is quite happy. Her friends, her family are all there. Then Dean comes back to town. Dean was someone she knew through high school. They didn't have the best relationship, and she feels that he is just judging that fact that she's never left. Because the entire book is told from Belle's perspective, we never kind of see what Dean is thinking in these interactions that they have where she has this perception. And at the start of the book, Belle is involved in a wedding for her cousin. It's a big high society wedding. Her cousin lives in Sydney, and she's brought all of her closest friends, all socialites, to this small town for the wedding. And Belle is the one that completely doesn't fit with this wedding dynamic, right? And she's a bridesmaid, and she also meets Tate, who is one of the groomsmen, and he sweeps her off her feet. And they have this whirlwind romance, and he convinces her to leave and come live Perth, or just outside of Perth, with him. And so she does it, and she starts a new life, and quickly realizes that there are some very big red flags about Tate. But she establishes her own life over in Perth, and then when her best friend needs her to come home, she does, and she suddenly finds herself questioning the new life that she's built, but also the life that she had before, and what she wants to do moving forward. She doesn't know whether she's going to stay in her hometown or leave again. She's built a job for herself where she doesn't need to work in any one particular location, so she has that option, but she's kind of paralyzed by the options that she has. And along the way, it is her falling for Dean and realizing that he has been in love with her for the longest time. So I won't say more than that because there's a lot more that goes on in the story. I will say there is content warnings in here for gaslighting and for a toxic relationship, but also there is a serious farm injury to a side character that affects a major part of Belle's support network, so be aware of that. There's also some really fun moments in the story around the small town trying to decide on what its big thing is going to be. And if you are unfamiliar with Australian small towns, we have a lot of big things in Australia. And this small town is trying to decide whether they're going to have the big burger or the big cock, which is a famous rooster that was part of the town. And there's also a mystery plot involving all of this. So there's always these little fun elements which are very clearly iconically Australian, and I love that so much. All right, and then the last book that I'm going to talk about, I actually read last night. It's another arc, again, from NetGalley, and it is Sunastara and the Venusian by Jess K. Hardy. Now, I have really loved everything I've read by Jess K. Hardy, so I was really excited by this because this is set in space. It's a sci-fi romance. All of her romances are 40+ romances, which again, I really, really appreciate. So the entire book is told from Sunastara's perspective. She is the hospitality director on a pleasure cruise liner, and this cruise liner is a spaceship that travels around through space. And she and her crew are really tight-knit, and we know that she is going through something. There's something that she hasn't dealt with, and the content warning here, you find it at the very start of the book, is that her child died in a really tragic accident. So she's grieving, and this was 5 years ago. He was quite young, and it is a big part of this book. So for everything else that's going on, there will be moments that are hard-hitting as she's dealing with her grief. And then tied in with that, we find out another character has lost their partner. So just keep that in mind. But it's so much part of their characters and so much of who they are that when you get to that point, even though it is heartbreaking and very much tear-worthy, it fits in with the storyline and it's not overdone, which again, I appreciate. So Sunastara is not ready to commit to anyone or anything because she's lost everything, and her job is her world. And at the start of the book, she is forced off the ship because she has to go to the cruise liners, company's main space station for a mandatory week of conferences and team building activities and things like that. And she is not impressed by this. And she skips out on one of the events, which is an ugly sweater contest. And she ends up having a one-night stand with a guy that she knows as Joshua. He knows her as Phoebe. And it is the best one-night stand she's ever had. The two of them just have this instant connection, and then at the end of the night, they go their own ways. And then a couple of months later, Joshua, also known as Freddie, turns up on her ship as the new language specialist, and the two are forced to work together, and Sunny has to reconcile the fact that he is head over heels for her, and he makes no secret of that. He's just all in from the word go and wants to make it work, but she's trying to keep a line between them because they're colleagues, but also because she doesn't do relationships because she can't lose anyone else. And eventually it all comes to a head. The two of them are trying to help another passenger who is trying to woo another passenger, and they're trying to, help matchmake and help their passenger just find love and all of that. And so they have to come up with a compromise on what they want their relationship to be. And on top of that, we also have a bit of a mystery plot in that there is a group of aliens that are coming on board the ship from a historically very violent race. All of the crew are very anxious about this happening. At the same time, there is also a senator and her wife and her child on the ship, and strange things are happening, and passenger manifests are being hacked, and the crew don't know what to make of it. And then eventually, obviously, they solve what's going on. There is an action element towards the third act of the book, but the primary focus is on Sunny and Freddie and how they find their way together despite everything else. So it was so fun and really great. And I really hope Jess K. Hardy is writing more with these characters and this world, because it is hilarious. And I was reading her author's note and she talked a little bit about how the idea for this book came about. She said there were two ideas that she had. She had Love Boat in space and she had all the pleasure pods malfunction. So there are some very steamy scenes in here, including a hilarious one where the pleasure pods all overload, and that causes something interesting to happen with all the passengers in that particular area of the ship. This one comes out really soon. It was super fun, highly enjoyable, and I hope that if nothing else, this is the one that you pick up, because it was really fun despite all the heavy themes that go on in the background. And that is it, my friends. That is my wrap up for books that I can talk about in this video. There may be a few more next week because I'm trying to wrap up my other big project, which I can't even remember how many books I'm up to. That's coming soon, so you've got that to look forward to. In the comments, I'd love to know, have you read any of these books, or are you planning on picking any of them up? Otherwise, feel free to leave recommendations that are similar to them down below. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.